Hey folks, Danny Mize back with the Nitty Gritty, and I'm here to show you my favorite fall knitting pattern. That is my owl beanie, and I'll flash some pictures up on the screen so you can see exactly what it looks like. I originally made this for my daughter, and my wife liked it so much she wanted a matching one for her. So you'll see both of those in the video. I'll flash some pictures up for you so you can see that. But this is going to be the step-by-step process of how to knit that beanie. And if you're a beginner, if you're advanced, it doesn't matter, you're gonna love it. The pattern knits really quickly, and it's actually pretty simple. Great way to learn not only how to knit a hat, but also it can be your first project that you knit in the round on circular needles. You can knit it on double pointed needles. It's really a versatile pattern that you can adjust to fit just about any size person, baby up to adult. Now this video is going to show you the step-by-step process of how to knit this beanie, but if you want the actual pattern, I will send it to you for free. All you need to do is subscribe to the Nitty Gritty. Follow the link in the description below to my website, knittinggritty.com. And if you subscribe there, I will send you this pattern for free. I will also provide links in the description to the materials needed to complete this project. So follow along. I'm excited to bring this pattern to you because I know it's going to become one of your favorites as well. Let's get to it. So today's video is going to walk you through the pattern that you see here. This is our fall owl pattern. We're going to walk you through step by step this entire pattern. There are different options, as you'll see in the link to this pattern, different sizes. This one here is one I made for my my 4-year-old daughter, but I made it a little big as a slouchy beanie with a little pom-pom on the back to give it some weight, as you can see there. So that's what we're going to be doing today. This particular hat that you see, the finished product was knit on this yarn here, which is called Perfection by Kramer Yarns. It's 30% merino, 70% acrylic. So for my 4-year-old, it's perfect. It's washable. I don't have to worry about it falling apart. So you can pick that up. Also, you'll see that in a link down below. But for today's video, I'm gonna set this aside. And today, when I knit this pattern, I'll be knitting one to match, but I'll be knitting it for my wife, and she loves this yarn. It's kind of like a t-shirt type yarn, but she absolutely loves it. It's made by, Yarnspirations by Bernat. This will come in a wide variety of colors, and I'll put a link for this down below as well. So that's what we'll be using today. So really for this hat, you'll need maybe half of this. We are going to, this is a bulky yarn, number 5, so we are going to be knitting in 10.5 needles. And so what you'll need for this pattern is, you'll have a couple options. You can knit the entire thing on double pointed needles. What I'm going to be using today are 16-inch circular needles. If you're knitting on the 16-inch circular needles, in order to finish the hat, you'll need still a set of double pointed needles, which we'll go through at the end. Or if you prefer to knit in the magic loop method, you're perfectly fine doing that with this pattern as well. So we're going to start off with a cast on. So I'm just going to pull some yarn out here. We're going to use a good number of stitches. This is knit in groups of 11. So the size that I'm going to cast on today would be the size, like I mentioned, for my wife. That one you see here, this is our, I'd say our child size, which is done with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 owls, and those are knit in patches of 11 stitches. For a larger size, really all we're doing is adding another owl in there to make it a little bit bigger. So, alright, so I'm going to pull this out. I prefer to cast on with a long tail cast on. If you've seen some of my videos on casting on in the past, I like to cast on using 2 stitches, or 2 needles. So I'm going to take one of those double pointed needles and I'm going to hold it against my circular needle here while I cast on. That makes sure I don't get too tight. So if you see the edge of this one here, nice and stretchy on the ribbing, and part of that I attribute to the way that I cast on. So this will keep me from getting my stitches too tight. Alright, so I finished casting on my stitches. As you can see, they wrap all the way around my 16-inch circular needle, and now it's time for me to pull out that extra needle that I was using to keep my stitches nice and loose. Set that aside. Now whenever I knit in the round, I prefer to use a stitch marker so that I don't have to think about where I'm at or when I'm going to be reaching the end of each round. So we're just going to start with that stitch marker on my right needle, and I'm going to start with my yarn, my working yarn, coming off of my right needle, and in my left hand I'll take the left needle and I'll join them together like this. So you can see my yarn is coming off the right side here. Now that'll work if you hold your yarn in your right hand. I hold the yarn in my left hand, and that will also work. Another trick that I like to use is when I start my pattern, I like to knit my tag end in for the first handful of stitches. Keep it just a little more secure when I join it here, and then when I have to sew that back into the work after I'm done, it's just going to make it a much sturdier piece. So I'm ready now to begin knitting and to join this in the round. So really, knitting in the round on circular needles is one of the easiest things you can learn. For this pattern, I start in a knit 1, purl 1 rib stitch. So I'm simply going to knit my first stitch, slip it off the needle, and just like that, I'm joined in the round. My next one's going to be a purl, and again you'll see I am going to take it nice and slow because we're joining the 2 ends here, but also, like I said, I am knitting my tag end with my working yarn for a few stitches, just to again keep that nice and secure. This will probably be my last one here because I cut that tag end a little short, but that'll work back into the end of it real nice. So I'm going to pull that down out of my way now. Now I'm just going to continue with the working yarn. You can see there I knit about 4 stitches with the tag end held together with my working yarn. So now I've got knit, purl, knit, purl. So I'm going to continue in that knit, purl pattern. I reach the desired length. And again, if you'll notice, I keep it nice and slow on this first time around, just to make sure I get this base set up properly. I'm not knitting too tight. I don't have an established pattern yet, so I want to make sure I'm continuing in the right knit purl pattern. Alright, so I finished my first round here, and as you can see, I've hit my stitch marker. I'm going to slip that just to the other needle, and I'm going to continue on until I reach the desired length of my rib pattern here. And again, that's going to depend on the size of hat that you are doing. So as you can see, the rib pattern is really starting to take shape. I'm going to go 2, maybe 3 more rounds to get to the length that I prefer. If you look at the finished one, we're still a couple of rows short of where that one is. 2 more rounds. So I am coming to the end of the final round in my knit one, purl one rib pattern. I finish that last purl, transfer my stitch marker, and from here we're going to work this setup row. It's actually 2 setup rows below the owl. So that's going to be the next step, is that setup row. We're basically going to be knitting 3 stitches and purling 8 stitches, and we're going to continue that pattern all the way around 2 times. And so we've done that setup row of knit 3, purl 8. We did that twice. Now to begin the actual body of the owl, we are going to reverse that, and we're going to prep for the cable. So we are going to, like I said, we're going to reverse that pattern. Instead of knit 3, purl 8, we're going to do 2 rows of purl 3, knit 8. So really that first row is just going to be knit the opposite of what you see. So we're going to purl the knit stitches, and we will knit the purl stitches. And we'll continue in that for 2 full rounds. Alright, so it's the next day for me. I'm not sure where everyone else decided to take a break last time, but here we finished our 2 setup rows. And now I'm going to go into the actual owl pattern where we start our cable row. One thing I want to mention is you can of course use a cable needle, and there's a lot of different varieties of cable needles, and I'll have links to those in the description as well. But for me personally, I prefer just using one of my double pointed needles. I find it easier to knit the stitches off of that needle rather than having to slip stitches from the cable needle back on, and you'll see that in a second. So we're going to start here. There's my stitch marker, and we're going to start into our first cable row. So we're going to purl, there you go. We're going to purl the first 3 stitches, and then we get into our first owl, and the owl is going to be knit over the 8 knit stitches that are in our pattern. So first we're going to slip 2 stitches from the left needle onto either your cable needle or, like me, your double pointed needle, and we're going to hold those in the back of the work, meaning the knitting for the next 2 stitches is going to take place in front of the cable needle. So I'm just going to knit the next 2 stitches. Then what I'm going to do is knit those 2 stitches that we slipped onto the cable needle. I'm going to knit them right off. As you can see, it's real simple. For me, it's a lot quicker and a lot less headache to just use a regular double pointed needle for that. Pull that out, you can see now I've got my 4 knit stitches on my right needle, and that's my first cable. So when we get through on the next round, you'll start to see this take shape actually. So what this is doing is when we cable holding behind, when we hold those stitches behind and we finish that cable pattern there, it's pulling these stitches out to the right. So this is what's creating the bottom of the body of the owl. And then we're going to repeat this, only a little differently. We're going to slip these stitches off and hold them in the front this time. I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches, and now those stitches off the cable needle, I'm going to knit those off, and it's that simple. So not a difficult pattern, and that's the cable pattern that we're going to repeat a few more times to actually complete the owl. So I'm going to continue with that. I'll show you one more time. I'm going to purl the next 3. When you're doing cables, the stitches in between each cable I believe they look best if you're doing purls between those, because it's going to give you some good separation, which you'll see as the pattern starts to grow, as the hat starts to grow and you start to be able to see that pattern. But the purl stitches really create a good contrast between the cables and the rest of the work that you're knitting. So here we are back to our 8 knit stitches. So first I'm going to slip the first 2, hold it behind, knit the next 2 stitches, and then real easy, I'm going to knit those 2 stitches off of the cable needle. Then slip the next 2 stitches, hold in the front, knit the next 2. Now I'm crossing over the front of my work with those cable stitches, knit them off the needle, and there we have our second one finished. So this is going to continue this entire round until we get back to our stitch marker there, and then we'll pick up at that point. Okay, so I'm back. I finished that first cable row or round, and the next 7 rows are going to be setting us up for the next cable round. So the next 7 rows are just going to be repeating that setup pattern of purl 3, knit 8. There's my purl 3. Be careful a little bit when you get to these 8 knit stitches, because you're knitting those freshly cabled stitches, and they're a little tighter, and it's easier for them to pop off the end of your needle before you can actually get them knit. So knit those 8, and that purl 3, knit 8 pattern is what we're going to repeat again for the next 7 rows. There's my 3, and again, nice and slow across those freshly cabled stitches, just to make sure we don't pop anything off. If it does pop off, it doesn't mean you can't fix it. It's just when they're cabled rows, it's a little bit more difficult. But right there, you can already see those stitches starting to pull out to the side from the cable row. That's what's going to begin to create the actual pattern. So by the end of this round, or maybe even the next round, you'll be able to really see the pattern start to take shape, which is what makes this exciting. So we'll pick up after these 7 rows. All right, so we finished those 7 setup rows of purl 3, knit 8, and now you can really start to see the shape of the owl's body. And this, for me, I don't know about you guys, but for me, this is when stuff gets to be exciting in knitting, because you can see this pattern start to take shape. So now what we're going to do is we are going to do our next cable round or row, and what you're going to see here is when we do the exact same cable pattern this time, it's going to start to pull the body in to create the top, or to shape the top of the body of the owl. And then after that, we'll start to see really the entire shape of the body of the owl. We'll start the same way. I'm going to purl the first 3. Then I'm going to slip 2 onto my cable needle, hold it in the back again, knit the next 2, and knit off the cable needle. So in reality, no different than the first round of cabling that we did. But you can see right there, it's pulling the top of this body in, and here, not to be concerned, here it's going to start pulling out to shape the head of the owl. So we accomplish both of those things in the same row. So again, I'm going to 2 off the needle, hold in the front, knit the 2, and then knit the 2 off my cable needle. And I'm going to go ahead and purl the next 3, and then we'll come back and see what that looks like once it's done. So Spread this all out a little bit. So you can see there, now we've got the body completed, and now we're pulling stitches out, and we're going to come back in one more time to create the head for the owl. So I'm going to continue this. We're going to continue the cable pattern of cable 2 back, cable 2 front, around until we get back to our stitch marker again, and we'll pick up from there. All right, so we're back. And now after finishing that second cable round, we're going to go into another setup row of our purl 3 knit 8, and we're going to follow that up by repeating the cable round or row again. So we finish that cable row. Next step is 1 round of our setup. Again, that's purl 3 knit 8, and we'll take a check of and see how that pattern looks after this. We knit through this first owl part here, so you can really now start to see the shape as it's forming here for us. So awesome, looks good. We're going to keep going the entire way around. We'll repeat this purl 3 knit 8 until we get back again to our stitch marker. Alright, so we finished that round of purl 3 knit 8. You can see how well that pattern is starting to show up now, at least the owl portion of the pattern. And again, I mentioned earlier the purl stitches between the cable sections really makes that pop and stand out a lot better on any work that you're doing that involves cables. That's one of my favorite things to do. So we're coming into a new section of the pattern where we're going to knit 2 rounds that are the same, but the pattern is going to be slightly different. We're going to start out by purling those 3. Now the purling sections are going to stay the same, but we're going to do a couple of setup rows for the face of the owl, and that setup portion is going to be across those 8 knit stitches that form our cable part. So what we're going to do, again, purl those first 3, and then we're going to knit 1, purl 2. These 2 purls is where the eyes will be, so purl 2. Then we will knit 2, purl 2 for the left eye, and then we will knit 1 to finish it off. So if we look at that again, we are knit 1, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 1. So basically the sides mirror each other. So then we're going to go back, we're going to repeat that process across this round and 1 more round. So purl, 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 3 purls just like we've been doing between the owls, and then knit 1, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 again for the left eye, and then knit 1 to finish it off. I'll go through that one more time. So purl 3 like we've been doing, and then across our 8 knit stitches it's going to be knit 1, purl 2 for the right eye, knit 2, purl 2 for the left eye, knit 1 to finish it off. So we'll repeat that till we get back to our stitch marker, and then we'll do 1 more entire round like that. So 2 rounds of this, purl 3, knit 1, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 1. And we'll pick up when we get past these 2 rounds. Alright, so we finished those 2 rows where really what we're doing is forming the face of the owl pattern. And if I get a little bit closer here, we can get a good view. You can see the 2 eyes starting to form on the owl's face right there. I mean, how cool is that? So we're going to do now, we'll do 2 more rounds of our regular pattern, knit 3, purl 8, We're going to do that twice, and then we'll go into our final cable round, and then we'll start to talk about actually finishing the hat towards the top of it. So let's get those 2 rounds in. Again, purl 3, knit 8, all the way around the hat. We're going to do that twice, and then we'll get back. All right, so once again, we finished those the rounds for the eyes. You can get kind of a view of that there. And then we did 2 rounds of purl 3, knit 8. Now we're back for our final cable round. And we're going to start off like we did in the past. This is going to be exactly like the other 2 cables that we did, but we're going to purl 3, and we're going to hold 2 on the cable needle in the back of the work, knit the next 2 off the left needle, then knit the 2 off the cable needle for the first half, then do the same thing, only hold 2 stitches in the front on the cable needle, knit off the left needle, 2 stitches, and knit the 2 stitches from the cable needle. And you can see that kind of closes off the face for the owl. And we're going to repeat that for 1 round, and then we can look towards actually finishing off the hat and determine a little bit how long we want it to be. So I'll just finish up this round, and we'll get back once we have the cables done. So we finished up that last cable round, and now we're going to do 1 more round of the purl 3, knit 8. This will be our final round of that, and then we're basically going to knit until we reach the desired length of our hat. All right, so we finished that last round of purl 3, knit 8, and like I said before, from here we are just going to knit in the round until we get to the desired length of our hat, at which point we'll begin our cast off. If you are knitting this for a child or an infant with maybe a smaller set of needles and a smaller gauge of yarn, then really what I've learned is beginning your decrease right after the final cable round and the final setup round is probably the best way to go. You don't need to knit in the round for another inch or 2. Really, you should start your decrease right after the owl pattern. Now make sure you do check that with the measurements that you are using and the gauge that you've come up with, if you've modified the pattern at all. But I would say if this is for a child or infant and you are not making it to be slouchy or baggy at all, then this is the good point to actually begin your decrease. Other than that, we're going to continue knitting in the round until we reach, the 6, 7, 8, 9 inches that you're looking for, depending on the size of hat that you want. So I'm going to take this out probably to about 9 inches, because again, I said for what I'm doing, this is going to be a slouchy style beanie. So I'm going to knit this probably to about 9 inches, and then I'll start my decrease rounds for the desired effect that I want. So I'll pick back up with you guys once we finish knitting to the desired length, and then we'll begin our decrease rounds. All right, so we're back. I've been working my decrease round. As I mentioned in the beginning, what I'm doing is going to be a slouchy beanie. Your decrease is a little simpler if you're doing something like that. So for my purposes and the pattern that I am doing, making this a slouchy beanie, I'm going to decrease a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is decreasing for a slouchy beanie usually will go like this. It'll be knit 1, then knit 2 together, and you're going to repeat that the entire round. Knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, and knit 2 together, which means I'm going that second stitch over, through both stitches out the back, wrap in, pull it back through both stitches, as you can see there, and then I slide both of them off the needle together. So it's knitting 2 together. No matter which method of decreasing you're going for, our next step will be as follows. So this is where we're going to use just a darning needle. So I know this is a scary part when you finish a project, but we're going to pull out plenty of this yarn here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that. I'll take that and get it through the eye of my needle. And now, starting through the stitches on my left needle, I'm going to take and I'm going to thread this needle through each of these stitches. And I'm going to do it all the way around, because then I'll be able to slip all the stitches off of the needle. And you can do that as you go if you want, but just to be safe, I like to keep them all on there while I'm going through. So you're going to thread this through all the stitches. If you did the traditional decrease method, just for a regular beanie instead of a slouchy beanie, this will only be 6 stitches left. But for the way I'm doing this particular hat, it's going to be a lot more stitches, but that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to pull this through all of my remaining stitches that are on the needle. Take your time, make sure you don't miss any. Alright, so I'm getting to my last few stitches here. Make sure I'm all the way through. So I've got that threaded through the entire round. Now all I'm going to do is simply pull the circular needle out, slip all these off here. Nothing to be worried about. If you threaded it properly, they're just going to come right out, and they'll all be held on that yarn there. So nothing to worry about pulling the circular needles out, because you threaded that yarn through there. Pull those out, toss them aside. Now, for my slouchy beanie purposes, I'm just going to pull this all together, and you'll see the effect it has on the top of the hat here. Well, you see the effect it has on the hat here. So it gives it that kind of pleated look at the top. So when we're talking slouchy beanie, that's the kind of look that we want, right? What you do now is you'll finish it off. I like to stick that yarn down inside and pull the hat inside out and tie it off on the inside here so it's not visible. But there you have it, guys. The last step will be putting the eyes on, which we'll come back for. But as far as knitting, we are done. Love that owl pattern. Again, all it is some wishbone cables, but when you do it with the right spacing, it comes with that owl pattern. It looks beautiful, and once we get the eyes sewn on there, it'll really stand out and you'll be able to see. Alright, so I grabbed the other hat just to show you the difference in the way we decreased and finished the crown of the hat. So on the smaller one for my daughter, you see here, you can see how that decreases. So when we do decrease every 9 stitches and then knit around, and then decrease every 8, knit around, 7, knit around, 6, you can see how it gets smaller versus the way we did it on the other hat here. You can see how it's kind of pleated, bunched up on the top. Just a different style. So we're going to go through sewing the buttons on for the eyes here. So like this one, we're going to do it on every owl. So you can see here I chose brown. Just choose a contrasting color. You can do bright colors if you like too. But here on this one, as you can see, we did brown. I'm going to just show you how we did that the best way. So just taking a normal needle, and I've got some brown thread going through the back side. So where you come out is where that's where you're going to want the button to be. So now I'm going to take the button. I use the 2-hole buttons. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. That's just what I like. I'm going to stick it right over the needle there. And I'm going to pull that needle, and then I'll go through the other hole, and I'll pull that tight. And that secures it pretty much in the place that I want it. And then it's pretty simple. I'm just going to keep going up through the left hole, pull it all the way out, down through the right hole. That's as simple as it is, guys. So we're going to do this. I like to do it on every owl. If you want to alternate, skip one every time, that's fine. But that is the finishing touch on our hat here.